One of the biggest roster battles to watch for the Tennessee Titans in training camp is the linebacker 2 spot. And I think James Williams is the one who wins the fight. I'll explain on today's edition of Locked On Titans.
You are Locked On Titans, your daily Tennessee Titans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Titans podcast. I am your host, Tyler Rowland, Titans fans. Today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. On today's show, we are going to continue our 2025 Locked On Titans training camp preview. We've gone through the entire offense. We talked about the edge rushers on yesterday's show. Now we need to get into the middle of the front seven, talk about the linebacker group, talk about the interior defensive linemen. On tomorrow's show, we're going to cap off the entire roster, talking about the secondary with the cornerbacks and the safeties. If you've missed any of the training camp preview, it's evergreen before things kick off next week on Wednesday with the first practice. So make sure that you check out all of that if you missed any of it, going through the entire roster. But before we dive into the linebackers and the interior defensive line, I do want to thank you for making Locked On Titans your first listen each and every day. Remember, Monday through Friday, Tennessee Titans content all year round, always for free. Make sure that you get subscribed, stay subscribed. It's your team every day here on the Locked On Titans podcast. Speaking of every day, shout out to my everydayers out there tuning in Monday through Friday. Couldn't do it without you guys. If you aren't an everydayer, you need to be one. Now is the time. Training camp kicks off next week, and then the season is right around the corner. With that being said, though, let's dive into this linebacker group. As you guys know, I like to do my training camp preview series looking at the locks to make the roster, the guys on the bubble to make the roster, and then the guys who are long shots to make the roster. And for me, there are only 3 locks at the linebacker position. Only 3. And I think the Tennessee Titans will want to have 5 or 6 inside linebackers on the ultimate roster, which leaves, like we talked about with wide receiver at the beginning of the week. We talked 6 wide receivers I thought were a lock to make the roster. That doesn't give you a lot of wiggle room when it comes to guys who are on the bubble. But at linebacker, there's only 3 guys who I think are locks to make this team. And number 1 at the top of that is Cody Barton. We're going to talk about the linebacker 2 spot. We're going to be talking about it for the next month and a half, for the next 2 months, quite honestly. That battle will probably wage into the regular season. They'll probably bounce back and forth at times, matchups, who's playing well. But at the top of the snake is Cody Barton. And that's not going to change. Obviously, barring injury, we don't want to see anything like that. The Titans would have to make changes. You have no choice at that point. But granted, everyone is healthy. We know that Cody Barton is linebacker 1 with no questions, and thank the heavens above for that. If you guys have been listening to this show for any length of time, you know that there were 3 offseason moves that I did not have a positive reaction to last year. All right? And one of them was Kenneth Murray. I did not like the Kenneth Murray signing. I think he's a limited player in coverage. He's limited with his versatility. He is a very physical player that can go downhill. But for the Tennessee Titans to trade Kenneth Murray, get a draft pick back, and then give a similarly priced deal to Cody Barton, a more versatile player, a player that is more of a 3-down linebacker, in my opinion, where I don't think that Kenneth Murray can play that kind of role. Now, your number 1 linebacker isn't so limited, has more versatility, has a more diverse skill set, and that allows him to be out on the field and be effective more often, and that's exactly what you want from your number 1 linebacker, the guy who's probably going to wear the green dot and call the plays and communicate with the rest of the defense. If you have somebody who has a skill set that it makes sense for that player to be out there for 3 downs, that's obviously going to improve what you can do on defense. So very excited about Cody Barton and the player that Cody Barton's been throughout the offseason program. He's been there. He's been a leader. You see in the mic'd up videos, the way he's coaching up all these younger linebackers, trying to be real with them, trying to get them in the spotlight. I just think that not only does Cody Barton give you a more versatile skill set on the field than what the Titans had last year, but he gives you better leadership, and he could truly be the heartbeat of the defense and a guy that can bring guys with him, which has been a big emphasis for the Titans this year. But that number 2 linebacker spot is where the questions come in. That's where we start to have the interesting discussion of, okay, so who's going to start next to him? And with the Tennessee Titans, I could see in passing situations, some dime linebacker activity, especially when Kevin Winston, the safety out of Penn State, gets healthy for the Titans and is fully ready to go. I could see him having some dime linebacker roles early on as they ease him into a defensive role. I could see the Titans bringing Amani Hooker or Xavier Woods down as a dime linebacker next to Cody Barton in passing situations, but that won't always be the case. And for the Titans, they like to play in nickel, and if they can stop the run in nickel with 5 defensive backs on the field, then you're always covered for the pass too. It's just a safer way to be. And that means you're going to need 2 linebackers. If you're playing on first and second down and you're a nickel and you're going against 2 tight end sets and you need to match that physicality, if you're already having 5 DBs on the field, you can't afford to have 6 and be in dime when you're in these early down scenarios where it's more game call neutral. You could see more runs than you would on a 3rd and long, obvious pass situation when you can go to 6 dime, and have 6 DBs out on the field. That's the whole point of the personnel package. That's why people don't do dime on early downs, because you would be exposed. So nickel is really the perfect in-between, and you're going to need 2 linebackers out there, which makes that second linebacker position so important. And look, there are guys on the bubble who could make a push and who could ultimately take this spot. It's not impossible. But the reality is there are 2 guys who were both drafted last year for the Titans who are fighting for this spot. And it's James Williams, who was the 7th round pick out of Miami, a converted safety, 6'4", 230 pounds. He was a 5-star recruit coming out of high school that, again, went to the University of Miami. He's 22 years old. And then you have Cedric Gray, who was the 4th round pick out of North Carolina, who was a linebacker in college. He's a little bit smaller, 6'2", 230 though. Bulky guy, but 6'2", a little smaller, but he was a better guy. This sounds crazy because James Williams is a converted safety, but Cedric Gray is a guy who I think is a little bit more instinctual in coverage. He's a little bit better in coverage, where James Williams is more of a guy who can come downhill. But in mandatory minicamp, we were hearing great reports about James Williams being in coverage. And if he has settled into the linebacker position and feels way more comfortable there after making a position change, I think the increased physicality, the increased explosiveness in general as an athlete, along with the coverage instincts that he could transition to the linebacker position that I didn't necessarily see at all times last year, that gives James Williams, to me, a higher ceiling. And Cedric Gray was injured quite a bit last year. He only appeared in 7 games for the Titans, 22 tackles. Looking at the snap count, he only played 48 snaps on defense last year, Cedric Gray. 126 of his snaps came on special teams. And look, you need to be effective on special teams, but he just didn't have a lot of experience on defense last year, whereas James Williams played in 13 games, had 111 snaps on defense, and 264 on special teams. Got much more experience and got to put himself in front of the coaches much more often. I am betting on James Williams to win the linebacker 2 spot. I think he's the one who takes it, but it's going to be a battle, and we're going to be talking about it for a while now. There are some guys on the bubble, though, that absolutely could make a push, but they need to make that push right now. Do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Summer sports are in full swing, whether you're all about baseball under the lights, which is always incredible, golf on the greens, also incredible, or high-stakes soccer action. FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action, everybody. Why not make it just a little more thrilling with FanDuel? You can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburnt at the beach. I love FanDuel. It's so much fun with the same game parlays. They keep that fresh every day with daily promotions. And when I do my same game parlays with my daily promotions, it's so much fun to track your parlay as it goes. Nothing looks as good as FanDuel, and it's easy to use, fast to pay out. It makes regular season games feel like must-watch events. If you're new to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. Titans fans, let's continue today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast, continuing our 2025 Locked On Titans training camp preview series. We did the offense. We started on defense with edge, now hitting the interior of the front seven. Talking to linebacker right now, but I am going to hit interior defensive line at the end of the show. I guess I don't have as much to say about the interior defensive line because just like last year, I'm just not a big fan of what they have. But we'll get there. We'll get there right now. Let's talk about who's on the bubble. So my locks to make the roster at linebacker are Cody Barton, James Williams, Cedric Gray. But on the bubble, and I don't know if I felt this way about this player a month ago, 2 months ago, 3 months ago even. But Otis Reese is squarely on the bubble, in my opinion. Now, Otis Reese is an explosive athlete for sure. 6'3", 214 pounds. Can move around sideline to sideline for sure. But in his 2 years with the Tennessee Titans, after being an undrafted free agent, he's played in 20 games, has 38 tackles. You start to look at the snaps that he's actually played. 90 on defense in his year one, 89 on defense in year two, only 11% of the available snaps for him. Otis Reese just isn't someone who's taken a step forward. He can get too far ahead of himself and misread on the run. Look, when he reads it right and he triggers downhill, he plays with explosive violence. But he doesn't have enough consistency to his game. And when he's going into year three, and you have guys who are actually drafted, like James Williams and Cedric Gray, who appear to be ahead of them. And then Otis Reese got a little banged up for mandatory minicamp coming out of the voluntary workouts, and he's not as available as the two guys ahead of him. He didn't get drafted, which means he's not making as much money as the two guys ahead of him. There's not as much investment. He's not as young as the two guys ahead of him. He's 27 years old. Otis Reese is 27. We just talked about James Williams, who is 22 and a half years old. We just talked about Cedric Gray, who is also 22 years old, if I can remember off the top of my head. 22, yeah, he's a little bit older than James Williams. I think he'll turn 23 soon, but Cedric Gray also another guy, and both those guys are 5 years younger than Otis Reese. So, what are we doing here? What are we doing? It's now or never for Otis Reese. That's why I put him on the bubble. I'm at the point right now where I don't think that Otis Reese has a real chance to be the starter. If I'm honest with you, I think right now Otis Reese is fighting to make the team because there are some younger players who I also have on the bubble who I think have a great shot to make an impact. And number one on that list is Anthony Ojiri. So the Tennessee Titans claimed Anthony Ojiri. I want to say Anthony, but it's Anferny. You know what I mean? It's spelled like that. But anyway, the Titans claimed Ojiri off waivers from the Saints, who cut him. Okay? He's 6'2", 230, so bigger and bulkier than Otis Reese. He's 24. He's going to be turning 25 this year. So he's 2 years younger than a guy like Otis Reese. Another physical player that plays with violence, okay, which is what you have to be for the Titans as one of those backup linebackers. He's played 353 special team snaps last year for the Saints. This guy is going to be great on special teams. So you look at Otis Reese. He could also be great on special teams. Otis Reese is a really good special teams player and could be even better with the proper coaching, which hopefully he gets from Bones Fossil this year. So I think both these guys do ultimately make the roster, Otis Reese and Anthony Ojiri. but they're certainly on the bubble, okay? You can't lock them in to the roster. They might be fighting for one spot. The Titans might be interested in having one of those guys at that spot. I think both of them make it, but, we can't know what the ultimate final roster truly looks like right now. I'm just saying, but Osery, coming off of a waiver, is fighting for a roster spot, and I think Otis Reese at his age, we talked recently, when we talked about the wide receivers at the bottom of the pack, the long shot wide receivers, how it's guys like Mason Kinsey, Jaquan Jackson, Colton Dow. These are guys who have been around for, well, not Jaquan Jackson, of course, who was around last year, but, think about Kinsey, Dow. They've been around for a year, couple years, 3 years, 4 years. And it's like at some point in time, why are we continuing to give you a roster spot when you're this certain level of player and there's not much potential, when we could just get a younger player who's already at that level, who at least has a little bit more potential, even if it's also unlikely? And Otis Reese at his age is at that point. Now, a guy on the other side of that is David Benda from Texas. Undrafted free agent. Titans brought him in. He's a little bit undersized. A little over 6 foot, 235 pounds, and that's why he went undrafted, because he's a little undersized with the height. But he's another guy who's violent and gets downhill, and he's an intelligent player. He's a high IQ player. So he may be a little undersized. He may not be as big as Otis Reese or Anthony Osery. He may not be as explosive. But very intelligent guy. And the Titans don't have a lot of linebackers, which is crazy because they used to have quite a bit. Think about the Jayon Browns and the David Longs. You know what I mean? Like, they used to have a lot of undersized linebackers under Mike Vrabel. But not a lot of the linebackers that we've talked about have been, right around 6 foot like Benda is, but he's smart. And that's one of the videos of Cody Barton in his mic'd up thing, is going over different things with Benda. And he's just soaking it up. He's just a guy who wants more and more and more and more. And I just have a feeling that when we look at the names that aren't locks, like Otis Reese, Anthony Osery, then some of the long shots we're about to get into. Like a guy like Curtis Jacobs. Curtis Jacobs is a guy who, out of Penn State, I think initially was with the Chiefs, if I recall, bounced around a little bit. Was with New England, though, right before the Titans got him. Played 9 games for the Patriots last year. Had 4 tackles. Did play 136 special team snaps. So he's a guy that can play on special teams. And that's where all of these guys that we're talking about right now, as I said earlier, going to be important. But he's a thicker guy. He's a big, heavy guy. He's 6'1", but he's 240. And Jacobs is someone who's going to have to beat out Reese and Osery on special teams if he wants to get himself a roster spot. And then there is one undrafted free agent on the team. Oh, I'm lying to myself. Wrong notes. We'll get there when we get to the interior defensive line. But then we have another claim. Amari Burney. Listen, Amari Burney is a guy who's been in the NFL for a couple of years. Las Vegas Raiders. Played some defense, but again, you know what we're talking about here. Special teams. 384 snaps on special teams. Burney was brought in purely as a special teams competitive guy. Burney is here to push Reese and Osery. Burney is here to push Benda and say, hey, this is how good I am on special teams. What are you going to do? But I think when you look at a guy like Burney, who is a little skinnier, 6'2", 228, but I think that helps him on special teams because he's just a little bit faster. But he's 25, so he's a little bit older than some of these other guys. He's just a little bit older, not quite as old as Otis Reese. But again, when you look at who's available to the Titans and you look at Curtis Jacobs, you look at Benda, you look at Osery, guys who are a little bit younger than a guy like Reese and Burney, it's like, okay, that gives you a little bit of an advantage. That's just the way that it works. But all of these dudes are special team because you talk about playing on defense, our locks, Cody Barton, James Williams, Cedric Gray, those are the only guys we truly want to see out on the field this year. That's the reality. Okay, but with that being said, Talking about guys that we want to see out on the field and how limited it is. The Titans, once again, have me very, very concerned with the interior defensive line depth. And quite frankly, there's nobody really out there who can help. Titans fans, let's cap off today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast. Doing our training camp preview series. We've talked about linebacker. Now I want to move into the interior defensive line. Before I do want to remind you guys that the Locked On NFL Top 100 will be released today, Wednesday, July 16th at 10 a.m. Eastern on Locked On Sports Today. The NFL Top 100 was voted on by all of the hosts of the Locked On NFL shows, and there are some stoners, folks. Don't miss where your favorite players were ranked, although I don't think there's going to be a lot of Titans, if I'm honest with you. Subscribe to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Looking at the Titans' interior defensive line, I think there are 4 locks to make the team, and if I'm honest with you, they are the same exact 4 locks that I had last year. Because they're the only players that I am certain are going to make the team, that I even believe in. It's Jeffrey Simmons. It's T'Vondre Sweat, it's Sebastian Joseph Day, and then it's Keandre Coburn. Remember, Keandre Coburn was teammates with T'Vondre Sweat in college. He was a guy who they even mentioned when they drafted T'Vondre Sweat as like, hey, Jeffrey Simmons is going to be a leader for him. Keandre Coburn is going to be a leader for him. And I just heard like babysitter. But regardless, I don't think any of that's changed. They want to keep Keandre Coburn around to mentor T'Vondre Sweat. So, Sebastian Joseph Day, underrated player last year for the Titans. He was out there. He was productive. 2.5 sacks last year, 18 tackles. He's an interior defensive lineman, so it's not like his stats are going to pop off the charts or anything like that, but participated in all 17 games, was durable. I mean, he played like 500 snaps for the Titans defense last year. So Sebastian Joseph Day is someone that they can count on. He's a reliable player, and he can play. You don't really want him in your pass rush group if you don't have to, but he can play out there if needed and, as part of a rotation. But he could be an every down 5 technique defensive tackle, defensive end, in a Titans base look of a 3-4. So I just love the versatility of Sebastian Joseph Day, the situations he can be used in, and his just reliability. He's just a reliable, good, average defensive lineman in the NFL. He's just the exact kind of guy that you want to fill out your roster with. So I really like that signing when it happened. I like bringing him back. I wanted to have him back. He is part of my locks. But after that, man, I really wish the Titans had better interior defensive line depth. Now, they brought back James Lynch. Lynch is 6'4", 295 pounds, another versatile guy. He can play kind of that Sebastian Joseph Day role where he can be your 5 technique, your defensive end in a 3-4 alignment. He's a guy who can play on the interior as well if you need him to as a defensive tackle in a 4-man front. Played in all 17 games for the Titans last year. Now, he didn't get a ton of snaps on the defensive side of the ball. I think he played 23% of his possible defensive snaps, but he was a solid, reliable player. Now, I will tell you this. Solid and reliable because he was out there. When we saw the Tennessee Titans run defense getting destroyed, a lot of it had to do with the backup defensive line. And the backup defensive line had a lot to do with James Lynch and Keandre Coburn. So the linebacker play was really, really awful in a lot of those bad run defense occurrences for the Titans. But the defensive line was getting blown off the ball too. And while James Lynch knows the system, he played all 17. He was durable. He was reliable. He wasn't great. He wasn't good. So it's I guess bringing back the devil is better than bringing back the devil that you don't know, that you can't rely on, especially for this Tennessee Titans coaching staff that has to win games this year to save their jobs. But the talent level is still very, very low. Carlos Watkins is an interesting guy. He was a highly sought-after recruit. Was a good player at Clemson and some of their really good teams, well-known player. He's more of an interior guy, 6'3", 305. I mean, he's an interior defensive lineman, but like we talked about Sebastian Joseph Day, and we talked about James Lynch, who can kind of be that 5 technique guy. I think Carlos Watkins is more of your 3 technique, more of a Jeffrey Simmons backup, in my opinion. Ton of experience in the NFL, been in the league since 2017. Guy who never really, I guess, took the step that people thought his talent would suggest. He was with the Cowboys last year, 15 games, was with Washington for 1 game as well. But he's just a rotational guy who, in my opinion, Watkins is 31. He'll be 32 this season. He's been a decent depth player in the NFL. A decent depth player, like end of the rotation, interior defensive lineman. But one of these younger guys, man, got to find a way to come out and take the spot. So those are the veteran guys who are on the bubble for me, James Lynch and Carlos Watkins. And again, I explained that I think that the Titans are more likely to go with one of those veterans because the coaching staff can't afford to fail. They would rather rely on veterans who have been in the NFL for a long time and know what to do than some of these young guys like a Devontae O'Malley, like a Cam Horsley, like an Isaiah Rakes, like a Phillip Bleedy. All of these guys who are undrafted free agents coming in trying to find a way. I think Devontae O'Malley and Cam Horsley have a better chance. They're a little bit more powerful, in my opinion. But whether the Titans pick the 2 older veterans, James Lynch, Carlos Watkins, or whether they pick one of the 4 undrafted free agent young guys in O'Malley, Horsley, Rakes, Bleedy, whether they pick any of those guys, the Titans are going to have bad interior defensive line depth. Like, it's just not going to be good enough. And the thing is, there is nobody on the free agent market who is really a great answer. So this is a position where I would expect the Titans to be pretty heavily involved in the waiver claim process. That's what I would be expecting for the Titans from this one. But with that being said, that is going to do it for today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast. Tomorrow, we're going to look at the secondary. We're going to talk about cornerback. We're going to talk about safety. Can't wait to dive into that. I do have a mailbag episode coming to kind of cap off all the offseason activities. Send your questions to me at TicTacTitans on Twitter. But that's going to do it for me today, folks. As always, I am your host, Tyler Rowland, and this was Locked On Titans.